Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 160. I am talking to Jose Cordeiro. He is the author of a book called The Death of Death, which has been translated all over the world. He's also a man of many talents with longevity. He's also worked in economics, and he's known Javier Milei for about 20 years. He just got back from Venezuela, too. We're going to talk mostly about Javier Milei, but we're going to talk about a few other things, too. We got a lot of time here, and we're going to have a great time talking to it. He's also organized the Liberty International Conference, which is a very good conference to go to. That's where I met this man. He's very well traveled, been to 139 countries. So how are you, Jose?
Very good, and happy to be with you to talk about so many things like my global bestseller, The Death of Death. You can see it above my head in Chinese, but also to talk about economics, freedom, Argentina, Venezuela, Javier Milei, Maduro, Chavez, whatever you want to.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off with, how did you get into the whole liberty movement to begin with? How did you become a libertarian?
Well, actually, as a South American, Latin American, I grew up believing in Fidel Castro, the revolution, Che Guevara. So I was originally kind of communist. But then when I went to university, I went to MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I began seeing that, communist economies were not that good. Like the Soviet Union or even Cuba were not doing well, and people were not happy. So I basically transitioned from one extreme to the other extreme, from being a kind of communist to being libertarian. And actually, this is something that Winston Churchill also did. There is this very famous comment that he made, that whoever at 20 is not communist is because, or socialist, is because you don't have a heart. But if you stay being socialist when you are 40, is because you don't have a brain. So this happened to me also from my younger years of being socialist to being now libertarian. And I think this is the best economic system. I have traveled around the world, as you mentioned, 139 countries. And I specialize also in communist countries. I have been to North Korea. I have been to Cuba. I was in the Soviet Union when it existed. I was in the former Soviet republics and the Eastern Bloc, Poland, Czechoslovakia, when there was Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, when it was Yugoslavia, all these communist socialist countries, also Myanmar, when it was communist, all these countries that have been a disaster, economic disasters, political disasters, and moral, ethical disasters. So I became a very strong libertarian after having seen this. And now this tragedy is happening in the country where I was born, in Venezuela. Venezuela, that was actually a democratic country, relatively well off for Latin America, now has turned communist, and is a horrible situation. Very poor country, horrible dictatorship, and a quarter of the population has left Venezuela. This is incredible. 8 million Venezuelans have left the country. It's the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world today.
From what I've heard, a lot of those Venezuelans went down to Argentina and helped out Milei.
Yes. Well, out of the 8 million Venezuelans, that's a lot of Venezuelans, the biggest migration in the world today, bigger than from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Libya, from Iraq. Today, this is the biggest migration. Many of them went to Argentina. And of course, they supported free markets. They supported an open economy. So many of them supported Javier Milei. When I was in Argentina for the inauguration of Javier Milei on December 10th, actually, I met with many Venezuelans who were working with him as well.
Yeah. So, so you've been, you've been doing this your whole career. When did you first meet Javier Milei? When and where?
Yes, actually, I worked in the dollarization of Ecuador. I have been proposing good monetary policy, eliminated local currencies, like Friedrich von Hayek said. We should have free competition of currencies. We should have competition in everything, including currencies. So if the local currency is bad, we should change it. So we proposed this in Venezuela also 30 years ago, then in Ecuador, and it happened in Ecuador. And I was involved in the dollarization of Ecuador in 1999 and 2000. I was with many Argentinians also in Ecuador. One of them, very famous, Domingo Cavallo. Domingo Cavallo, who had been the economic minister of Carlos Menem in Argentina, and many other people. They invited me to go to Argentina and to talk about what was happening. That was 2 decades ago. And I went to many universities. And in one of these universities, I met this young, hyperactive person, Javier Milei. And we became friends because I liked his style. Not only was he a libertarian, he was a hyperactive person, very dynamic, very active, a very happy person. So we became friends about 20 years ago through dollarization, talking about what had happened in first Ecuador, then in El Salvador, where I was also involved in the dollarization of El Salvador, and then other dollarizations in Eastern Europe, two in the Balkans, Montenegro and Kosovo. I was there also in the years 1999, 2000. And then in the Baltic countries, Estonia and Lithuania, that also basically dollarized, but with the German mark, the Deutsche mark. They adopted the Deutsche mark and then the euro. This was not taking the euro. This was adopting the euro before the euro became a currency, and it was the common currency of the European Union. Anyway, going back to Argentina, we became friends, and then every time I would go back to Argentina, we would meet. He would invite me to some activities in universities where he was also teaching. In his company, he was working for the airports company of Argentina. And then we talked about many things. We talked about the future. We talked about the singularity. He likes the idea of the singularity also. We talked about immortality. And when I presented the Spanish edition of my book, La Muerte de la Muerte, he came to my presentation in the year 2018. And he has my book in Spanish at the top of his personal library. This was reported by La Nación, which is like the New York Times of Argentina, that this is the favorite book of Javier Milei. So he invited me to his inauguration last December. And so I also gave him my book now in English, The Death of Death, again, his favorite book. And he believes in many of these ideas about a better future through liberty and through technology. He's very interested in technological changes and what is happening with artificial intelligence, cryptocurrencies. He's a fan of cryptocurrencies, but also robotics, longevity, and cloning, which is also important. We talked about cloning. I think it must have been 2015 or 2016. And he had a dog that he loved, was called Conan, Conan the Barbarian. That was Javier Milei's dog, Conan the Barbarian. But the dog was old and it was dying. And so we said, well, how about cloning the dog? There are many places now where you can clone dogs. Companies internationally in Singapore, in South Korea, but also in the USA, in Texas, there is a company called Perpetual that clones dogs. And that is where he cloned his dog, Conan the Barbarian. And he made 4 clones. And he named the clones after famous economists. One is called Milton, because of Milton Friedman. Another dog is called Murray, because of Murray Rothbard. And 2 other dogs are called Robert Lucas, because of other famous economist, Robert Lucas. So those are his dogs, which are cloned. I think he's the first president that has cloned his dog. And he has four dogs that he loves. He says that his dogs are his four-legged children. And he made a space for them in the presidential house where he lives now. He made a special place for his dogs. He loves the dogs. He loves people. He loves animals. He loves life. He's a fantastic person. I love him. I think he's the best thing that has happened to Argentina in 100 years, in a century, since Argentina was wealthy 100 years ago, and then it became more and more socialist and decadent country and society. But now Javier Milei is changing it.
Yeah. So during the time you've known him, whom has he cited as influences? I mean, I've heard his speeches. I've heard him mention Murray Rothbard. I've heard him mention Israel Kirzner twice. Who else have you heard? What books has he talked about? What economists or what philosophers or whatever has he talked about over the years?
Well, again, you can see because of the name of his dogs how influenced some economists have been in his life. Robert Lucas, as I mentioned, Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard. Besides them, he talks about many other people, including some famous intellectuals in Argentina, Alberto Venegas Lynch.
Yes, of course.
Lynch, who is a very, very famous Argentinian libertarian. Also, another Spanish libertarian, very famous in the Austrian School of Economics, Jesus Huerta de Soto. Jesus Huerta de Soto, and then many other people. In terms of dollarization, also, he's very interested. So he has quoted me, but mostly he quotes me about something different, which is about technology. He quotes me about exponential technologies, about the singularity, and about longevity and immortality. I am actually an engineer and an economist. When I studied at MIT, you had to have a major and a minor. My major is engineering. My minor is economics. So I also took many courses on economics at MIT, but that's my minor. My major, what I like the most actually is engineering, because I think science and technology is what changes the world faster than anything else. But on those subjects is where Javier Milei quotes me when he talks about the singularity, when he talks about the future, about longevity, about immortality, and again, about my book. That truly is the top on his personal library. Now, in multiple languages, he has them in Spanish and English. So I'm really, really excited. And he has said it publicly that he loves my book. So you also need to read The Death of Death, because I tell Javier that those who read my book will not die. Guaranteed, guaranteed. If you read my book, you will not die, or your money back.
Of course, if I'm dead, I can't get the money back anyway.
Yes. Anyway, so these are the subjects I talk with Javier, and I have been proposing many things, from cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and rejuvenation technologies in Argentina. So many things are happening. And so I'm really excited, very optimistic about Argentina and the future of Argentina after a century of economic, political, and even moral decay. Now, for the first time, there is some hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. How would you say that he's evolved during the time you've known him? Because I've heard he converted to anarcho-capitalism by reading the Market for Liberty that was translated by Jorge Trucco and some other things. How has he changed over the years during the time you've known him? His outlook?
Well, first, when we talked, he was very interested on economic growth long-term economic growth and economic history. I have also worked on that area with probably the most famous economic historian last century, whose name was Angus Madison. Angus Madison, who was an economist at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe. He
Angus
made
Madison, you said?
Angus Madison, Maddiso, Angus
Okay, British
Madison.
economist, yeah.
Yes,
Angus Madison.
he
With
was
two
a
D's, yeah.
fantastic economic historian, originally from Britain, but he lived a long time in Paris, where the OECD is located in France. I visited Angus Madison, who was a great person. He made the long history, economic history of the world, beginning at the time of the Roman Empire. What was the income per capita at the time of the Roman Empire? And he made forecasts until the year 2030. So
Yeah.
it's really fantastic work. Actually, he's the one that for the first time saw how wealthy were countries 1 century ago, 2 centuries ago. So Javier Milei was fascinated by that. How Argentina was one of the top 5 or 10 nations at the beginning of the 20th century. And now in the 21st century is the opposite. It is a tragedy. It's a poor country. And he was very interested in that. And so he also became more and more libertarian, learning that freedom, liberty, is what causes all these fantastic advances in economics. And I would say also in technology. We need technology for free competition of ideas. And anyway, so his thinking has been incredible. And even though he's an economist, he likes technology. Uh, like me, at the opposite. I consider more myself a technologist, an engineer, but I also love economics. So we complement each other, and that is why we talk about all these issues, because he loves also technology and the future. A positive view of the future based on liberty and based on technology.
Yeah, wow. He seems like he's very optimistic about the future, and he seems to have this, this attitude that this is all inevitable. It's really not something you see, but the socialists have had this arrogance about it too. That socialism is inevitable, and it hasn't been.
Yeah, of course. He is a visionary person, and he looks the long-term trend in history. And again, we are living in the best positive world today. We have never been wealthier. We have never been freer. We have never been more pacific in history ever than today. When you look at the world 100 years ago, not only it was poorer overall, it was true that Argentina was much wealthier in relative terms, but not in absolute terms. Today, the situation is better. But anyway, 100 years ago, the human condition was horrible. There were continuous wars everywhere. There was a lot of more poverty, a lot of more hunger. Life expectancy was very short. Today, life expectancy is reaching 80 years average in the planet. 100 years ago, it was 40. And at the time of the Roman Empire, when Angus Madison began compiling his statistics, average life expectancy in the world was about 20 years per person. And not only that, the 20 years, this was average. That is because many people died as children. Until recently, most people died before they were 5 years of age. So average life expectancy was not 40, was not 80 like today. It was only 20. But also in terms of economic wealth, the GDP, the income, gross domestic product per capita at the time of the Roman Empire was less than $1,000. $1,000. We were basically animals 2,000 years ago. We were poor. We had short, brutish lives, as Hobbes, the British philosopher Hobbes described. Our lives were short and brutish, and we had an income per capita of less than $1,000 per person per year. Today, in the wealthiest countries, it is over $100,000 per person per year. We have some countries like Luxembourg, like Ireland, which has had an incredible economic growth in the last few years. Ireland, Luxembourg, Switzerland, they are over $100,000 per person per year today. And this continues throughout the planet. We are living in a wealthier world, and the freer countries are, that is why I mentioned Switzerland, Luxembourg, Ireland, the wealthier people are. And the less free countries are, the poorer they are. And that brings me down to my native Venezuela. Venezuela today has a monthly salary of about $10, average monthly salary. The official average salary in Venezuela is $10. Horrible. Venezuela has about the same income as Cuba and North Korea. What is common in Cuba, North Korea, and Venezuela, besides a $10 monthly salary on average, is communism, socialism. This is the cancer of the world. Communist ideas, communist countries, only $10 per person per month in Korea, North Korea, sorry, Cuba or Venezuela. While rich countries, free countries have incredible incomes and they continue growing.
And Milei has pointed this out several times, talking about how freer countries are doing better.
Yes, he talked
Yeah.
about that at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Actually, it was really incredible. His speech, even though he spoke in Spanish, uh, his English is not great, so he preferred to speak in his mother tongue, Spanish. Anyway, that speech was translated immediately in social media with artificial intelligence. And Elon Musk actually retweeted or he put it in x.com, the speech of Javier Milei. He put the speech of Javier Milei and in English, real-time automatic translation. It was absolutely fantastic. Elon Musk loved it, and I loved it too. And if you haven't seen it, you have to see it in English with his own voice, translated with artificial intelligence.
Yes, definitely. I've seen the World Economic Forum speech. You've known him. When did he start becoming well known? I've heard, it was like 2015. Can you tell us about, the time you've known him since he started? But apparently he got on television once. They got a lot of ratings, so they kept inviting him back to these talk shows.
Yes, exactly. Well, as I told you, the reason why I liked him and we became friends is because of his style. He's hyperactive. He's very outspoken. He's very frank. He says what he thinks. And I love his style. But he was working for a company, the airport company, as I mentioned, in Buenos Aires as the chief economist. So he couldn't be a public voice like that, so openly and so radical. But then again, yeah, he did go to some TV programs and they loved him. So this was before the pandemic. Then during the pandemic, he decided to go all the way to media because also he didn't like many of the things that were happening during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the lockdown in Argentina or in most of the world. But anyway, so he became a public personality. He ran for office in the Congress, in the House of Representatives. He was elected as deputy at the House of Representatives, and he did something incredible, which is beautiful. He began raffling his salary, his monthly salary. He made raffles. Every month, he had a raffle to see who would win his salary, because he said that public employees should not get money, and especially not big amounts of money, because they are public servants, public employees. So this was radical. Imagine how many deputies in Congress do you know who actually give away their money and in a public raffle every month. So this made him very, very, very popular. Also, he began saying that Argentina had about hyperinflation, a horrible inflation for so many years. He said, we need to dollarize. We need to eliminate the local currency and have free competition of currencies. And then the Argentinian peso would die in one day, and the dollar would actually, or maybe gold, or maybe the euro, or maybe Bitcoin could become official currency, or non-official, because it shouldn't be mandatory currency. Anyway, so these ideas made him very, very popular. And so he also talked about a chainsaw cutting many ministries, government offices. In fact, one of his first public announcements was the elimination of half of the ministries in Argentina. There were about 18, and he eliminated 9 of them. So now there are only 9 secretaries of state or ministers, as they are called in Argentina. From 18, they went down to 9. And he has been eliminated many public jobs that don't do anything. Actually, they do many bad things. Instead of doing good things, they do bad things. So anyway, those things brought him popularity before the election, dollarization because of the high inflation, and also donating his salary once he was elected to the House of Representatives of Argentina.
Yeah, so well, I've heard Milei would raffle off his salary. He'd like raffle it off, and that was a way to build a mailing list. Brilliant idea, really.
Yes.
And Milei was also the lead singer of a Rolling Stone cover band and a soccer player. What has he done? Why has Milei succeeded when so many others have failed, Jose? You know him really well. What does he have? What is he doing?
Well, obviously, part of it is his personality, as we have discussed. I personally loved his style when I met him. That is why we became friends. He's, I repeat, outspoken, very direct, very frank. He speaks his mind out, and with the right ideas. Libertarian ideas. So I think he's a lovely person. And obviously, he blamed all the political system in Argentina that has destroyed what was one of the wealthiest countries in the world about a century ago. So I think his style, his openness, his frankness, his directness have been fundamental for him to be elected and to be able to change Argentina. But of course, he has a lot of opposition, what he calls the political caste, the caste system. There is these entrenched politicians who have been there for decades, for many, many years, who live out of the government. So they are opposing him. And as you might understand, he closed half of the ministries, half of the government secretaries of state. So all these people oppose him. So he has a lot of opposition. And also some of the governors of the states of Argentina. The states are called provinces, the provinces of Argentina. And many of them are from the old guard, from the old political caste system and the horrible party, the Peronist party, or even worse, the Kirchnerist party, because within the Peronists, there is a group even worse, which are the followers of Kirchner and Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who is the widow of Nestor Kirchner, who was a Peronist that began this family cult of the Kirchner family, just like before the Peron family and the Juan Domingo Perón wife. Juan Domingo Perón had 2 wives. Both of his wives were also involved in politics. So this is how the Peronist party began, and then the Kirchner party also. But anyway, so there is a lot of opposition, but his beginning, he's very bold. I admire how bold he is, how frank he is, and what he has done in his international trips. You know, he went to Israel and he moved the embassy, the Argentinian embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Uh, Not many countries have done that. And well, he went from Jerusalem, he went to Rome, he went to the Vatican, he met with the Pope, who happens to be Argentinian. Pope Francis
Yes.
is Argentinian as well, and he's socialist. So it was a very interesting conversation between a socialist Pope and a libertarian president, both from Argentina.
Yes, and he also met with Giorgia Meloni. Yeah, they seemed to have a good time. They certainly seemed like they enjoyed hanging out. This is something too. The boldness. It seems like he's really happy though, and he really enjoys life. I mean, do you think this is part of what's made him successful? Because uh, he doesn't really come off as being, he doesn't really come off as being angry, at least in what I've seen him talk about. But he's still, very straightforward about, when he asks Miriam Bregman, why do you favor this ideology that's killed, 100 million people, for example, do you think that's maybe part of the key? I mean, what? Because we have to learn as much as we can from this.
Yes, yes, of course. Well, besides being a libertarian in general, he's also, I would say, a singularitarian, a futurist who believes in the good future thanks to the advances in technology. Technology is what has made the world advance incredibly in the last few centuries and will continue making life better and better. And let me recommend two other books, not just my book, The Death of Debt, but books about long-term economic progress. There are two that I love. One is by Steven Pinker. Steven Pinker, who was a professor at MIT, now he's at Harvard. He has written incredible books, Steven Pinker. And he also talks about the importance of liberty, technology for the advances of humanity. And he wrote a book several years ago, I think over a decade ago, called The Better Angels of Our Nature, which is the famous phrase on the speech by Abraham Lincoln, the better angels of our nature. And then just a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, he wrote another fantastic book called Enlightenment Now. Enlightenment Now. How progress has made the human condition be much better today. So Steven Pinker from the USA, and then also in the United Kingdom, there is another incredible writer who wrote The Rational Optimist. And The Rational Optimist, his name escapes my mind now. If you know the book, or let's Google The Rational Optimist. He was a member of the House of Lords in England. And he has also written many books he on technology. But the one I like is The Rational Optimist. So let's Google
Matt
here.
Ridley.
Matt Ridley. Thank you, Matt Ridley. Yes, he's no longer in the House of Lords, as far as I know, but he's still a visionary talking about these ideas about the advancement of humanity. And these ideas are positive, as opposed to the socialists and the communists who think we are going to be in a gray, dark world. Liberty actually makes humanity advance to live longer, better, healthier lives. So that is why I'm also a libertarian and a technologist, a futurist, a singularitarian, transhumanist. We believe in super intelligence, super longevity, and super happiness. And I think these are very important things to consider and to talk about, because we are in the world of artificial intelligence now. So this is moving very fast. So we are going to be connected to artificial intelligence, and it will make us more intelligent. You know, this is also something I discussed with Javier Milei and other people. You know, actually, I would prefer to vote for a robot president, you know, because robots will have unlimited knowledge. They will have access to all the information, to all the social issues, economic issues, political issues, environmental issues that we humans cannot handle because we have very small brains, very tiny brains, and very limited capacity. But an artificial intelligence can have access to all the information, can really know what are the worst things happening and how to change those bad things into better things. And artificial intelligence is fantastic. So I love artificial intelligence. I want to be more intelligent. And I want to be more intelligent naturally and artificially. So I am not afraid of artificial intelligence. What I am afraid of is human stupidity. What makes me worry is human stupidity. And when I look at so many politicians and I say, oh, these politicians are so much more stupid than the average person. I mean, these politicians are horrible, horrible politicians, stupid politicians. That is why I would love a robot president, an intelligent, super intelligent president. That could be, of course, libertarian because that is the way of the future. And once again, freer countries are wealthier countries, are richer countries. So liberty goes with technology, goes with well being, goes with intelligence. All these things are related. So, yes, I want to be more intelligent and I love artificial intelligence and I want a robot president.
Yeah. So, uh, do you know anything about the people who are currently around with Milei? Like, or do you have any opinions on them? Like Victoria Villarreal, Diana Mondino. He just fired his labor secretary. We learned about that. So because he didn't freeze the salaries, which is what Milei told him to do. So what can you tell me about? I know Diana Mondino is very good. What can
Yes.
you tell me about all these people?
Yeah, I know several of his ministers, like Diana Mondino. Actually, I have known her before I met Javier Milei because her brother was working with Domingo Cavallo at
Yes,
the.
Domingo Cavallo. Yeah, and just to clarify, since people, that's I want to make sure people know who this is. That's Cavallo. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the president of the central bank, from 82 to in 82. He was and Minister of Foreign Affairs under Menem. Yeah, just wanted to make sure people clarified this. Yeah, he was born
Yes.
in Cordoba. Yeah, so yeah, and he is apparently got in some trouble later, though. Looks like, but yeah, just wanted to make sure we got who Cavaggio was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, we pronounce it Cavallo, even though it has LL,
yes,
Domingo Cavallo.
the LL has different pronunciations around the world.
Yes. Well, all letters, all letters. But anyway, so
Yes.
yeah, his name is Domingo Cavallo. And Diana Mondino's brother was working with him. And I met Diana also going in many of my trips to Buenos Aires, Argentina. She was the dean of one of the top universities, UCEMA, in Buenos Aires. So she invited me many times to Buenos Aires. So when I was with her, I would also be with Javier Milei. So I've known her for a long, long time. I also know the Minister of the Interior, who is a very, very important person, Guillermo Francos. Guillermo Francos, also a top person.
Guillermo Francos, yeah.
Yeah, he really is totally devoted to making Argentina a better place. They are people already, beyond good and bad. What they do is because they believe in it, and they don't need to be in the government. Actually, it is bad maybe for many people to go into government, but they are not afraid. So I like him also very much. And then Nicolas Posse, who is like the chief of cabinet, also a very, very smart person, very smart person. So I like him too, and some of the other ministers. But now he has reduced the ministries to only 9. Also, I met when I was with Javier. He introduced me to his minister of. He combined education and health, and he calls this human capital, the Ministry of Human Capital. So the new ministry actually is a fantastic woman, Sandra, and so she has this incredible responsibility.
Yes.
So
Sandra Petovello.
Yeah, Sandra. So she is in charge of all of these separate ministries before, like health, education, and many social conditions. And she's doing very well. Also, the Minister of Secretary of Justice, that was the candidate. She was the candidate
Mariano Bueno Liberona.
No, I'm talking about Patricia Bullrich.
Oh, Patricia Bullrich, the Minister of Security, yes.
Security, sorry. Yeah, Patricia Bullrich, she's very important because she was the candidate from the other party that was more or less conservative. And so this was important also to Javier Milei, to have some of the center-right people to join his libertarian movement so that they could form a government. So Patricia Bullrich, that was an opponent during the election, joined his team as Minister of Security. And she's very important because she's in charge of stopping all the Peronist and the Kirchnerist complaints of people trying to stop the traffic of Buenos Aires, which now has become illegal. You cannot just go and close in the streets anytime you want for any reason. So yeah, Patricia Bullrich is very, very important also.
Yes. But as we pointed out before, there are these nice little big open squares and stuff in Buenos Aires where you can go protest. Like, you can go down to the Plaza de Mayo right there in front of the Casa Rosada, and you can protest there. Nice big open space. Just stand on the grass, stand on the cement, and just protest right there. And you're not going to block any traffic at all.
Yes, well, that is what they should do from now on. There are many places to protest. So protest is free, is open.
Yes.
What they cannot do is to stop the city, to stop people who want to work, because workers were complaining they could take 2 hours, 3 hours to get to their jobs, and they needed the money. And because of these protesters that are related to political reasons only, to the Peronist party and to the Kirchner's movement, they stopped the city, and that harmed many people, many workers who need the money, who need to work, who need to be employed.
I've also heard stories, though, that like some of these protesters were blackmailed into protesting. Like I've heard stories like, go out and protest or we're going to stop your cancer treatments, that kind of thing.
Yes, sadly, this is true because, again, the Peronists, the Kirchnerists, they control still some states, some provinces. And so they send people to Buenos Aires with these protests. Also, there is international support from communist governments, like the Maduro government in Venezuela, or the Nicaraguan dictatorship, or especially the Cuban dictatorship. They support the Peronists and the Kirchnerists, and so they are part of this communist intelligence that is trying to stop Javier Milei.
Well, the Cubans have been doing stuff like this since the 1970s. I mean, they've been stirring up. They've been affiliated with FARC in Colombia. They've been affiliated with Shining Path in Peru. They've been stirring the pot everywhere. By the way, also, you mentioned that minister, Nicolas Posse, is it?
Yeah, Nicolas Posse. He's the chief of cabinet.
He's also climbed Aconcagua a few times. I respect him a lot more because of that.
Yes.
That's
So
the highest mountain in South America. So, and also the highest mountain outside of Asia.
yeah, so he has Milei has a great team, and I know them, some of them for many years, as I told you, and they are beautiful people, visionary people, and people who really
Yes.
want to improve the condition. And again, like Javier Milei, who was giving away his salary, and he froze his salary, but the Secretary of Labor actually following on something done by the Peronists before, that there should be increases of politician salaries. So he didn't stop the Secretary of Labor. So Javier Milei fired him because he said public salaries should not increase, especially the ministers, the secretaries of state, and the president
Yes.
himself. Again, he didn't care about the salary because he was already given his salary, and he was a successful economist on his own. So he doesn't need, the public money. So because this increase that came because it had been planned before, he had to fire his secretary of labor to give an example that these things are not admissible in the new Argentina, especially politicians. They have to suffer, and the politicians of the caste, the old system that destroyed Argentina.
Yes. I mean, he's really, and, yeah, I told people, I said, you realize he flies regular airlines. They're like, wow, he flies regular airlines. He's just out there living it, taking the same airlines as everybody else has. You occasionally see this video where he's on the plane. It's a great story here.
Yeah,
Also,
talking about airlines, one more thing, because he wants to privatize all these big
yes,
government enterprises, and that includes telecommunications. There are media
yeah,
companies, and also the airline, Aerolíneas Argentinas,
yeah,
the government-controlled airline, is totally bankrupt because they were giving thousands and thousands of free tickets to politicians. All local politicians will get several free tickets, and obviously an airline like that could never be profitable.
yes.
Never.
I've also speculated that if they open up the skies, I figure, somebody like Valaris or Avianca will probably move in there.
Yes.
I know Latam was there for a while, but Latam pulled out. But they'll get airlines from other countries just setting up a base there.
Absolutely. Argentina is a big market
Yeah,
for
yeah.
airlines.
Avianca's already done that in a few other countries, and so has Valaris.
Yes. So he wants to privatize the petroleum company, the airline company, the TV government-controlled company, the news company. Also, because all these companies are bad. They just have thousands of public employees that don't do anything. Because the previous Peronist governments, they would put their friends. In fact, there are many people who are not alive, but they are also getting salaries who are being given to the friends of the friends. All these salaries of dead people. Horrible situation in Argentina. So I think Javier Milei is bringing a lot of seriousness, reality to the political system, and transparency. We need more transparency. This is how corruption is killed. And that is why I hope that he moves quickly with the free competition of currencies. But among competition, I like these ones. I think these are good. And he printed some dollars with his face. These are not real dollars. You can see they are too big. But
Yeah, they
I
are
also
too big.
I like what it says in the back, in God we trust. But a friend of mine told me that the L came out of gold. It should be in gold we trust, but the L came down and it now says in God we trust. But anyway, if it is in God or if it is in gold, we believe in something stronger than politically controlled currencies like the peso that had hyperinflation.
Yes, indeed. It's definitely not well respected down there. Yeah, there's been a lot of A lot of great things going on. So yeah, it's what kind of impact do you think this is going to have on around the rest of South America? I saw Milei's book in the airport in Lima, for example, on sale. So people are definitely talking about him in other countries, at least the
Yes,
other Spanish-speaking countries.
yes. Well, this continue growing his international impact. In fact, the small libertarian communities in Latin America are trying to learn and how to take these ideas into politics. Also included in Venezuela, the candidate that has been actually, as we say, inhabilitated. I don't know how you say properly in English. She has been taking away her right to run for political office. Maria Corina Machado. She's also a libertarian. And Maria Corina Machado has also many contacts with the people, the new government in Argentina, and in other governments. So I think this impact will be important. Also, in Liberty International, and as you know, I am one of the board members of the directors of Liberty International. We had our annual conference in 2023 in Madrid. The next
Yeah,
conference will be in Dallas, Texas. And then
yes,
the next one in 2025 will be in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I
yes,
actually talked to this about Javier Milei. Uh, of course, it's hard to know the agenda of the president of a country, and a big country
yes.
like Argentina, close to 50 million people, is not a small country. But anyway, so hopefully we might even have President Javier Milei for the Liberty International World Conference in Buenos Aires in August 2025. So
Yeah,
he will have a lot of impact internationally. Also, he's coming back to Spain. He's coming. I live in Madrid now, in Spain. He should be coming in June to receive an award, to receive the Liberty Award of Spain. So we are very excited that he can come. This will help us to promote these ideas in the Spanish-speaking world and hopefully beyond Spain and the Spanish-speaking world.
yes, indeed. Yeah, it's a. I'm also learning, Jose, that there's actually an excellent liberal tradition among Spanish thinkers, going back to Cervantes and stuff like that. And I wasn't really aware of this, but it looks like there's definitely an excellent tradition of liberal thinking amongst in the Spanish speaking world.
Yes, actually, in Spain, we have what is called the Salamanca School.
Yes,
Instead of the Austrian School of Economics, we have the Salamanca
yeah, the
School.
School of Salamanca. Yes,
Salamanca was
but also
the top.
Cervantes and a few other people, though Miguel de Cervantes and
Yes, Miguel de Cervantes, the author of Don Quixote. Don Quixote.
yes,
He was also a libertarian. Actually, Don Quixote is a story of love and liberty. Love and liberty. So I recommend for those who haven't read it, this is actually the best selling book in the planet after the Bible. If you
oh
look at
wow, yeah,
what are the best selling books in the planet, or the books that have been printed the most, number one is the Bible. And number two is Don Quixote. Of course, Cervantes wrote other books, but this is his number one book, very famous Don Quixote. And again, it is about liberty, it is about freedom, and about love. So you can combine liberty and love.
so the Quran's not higher than Don Quixote.
No, what I have read is Don Quixote is number two after the Bible. But in any event, we are talking about books with incredible impact and that people read. Anyway, it's a beautiful story. It's a fantastic love affair, romantic affair,
Yeah.
and liberty.
Well,
So yes,
I know Milei is also good friends with that guy from Vox in Spain.
yes.
What's his name?
Santiago Abascal.
Yeah, Santiago
Santiago
Abascal. Yeah.
Abascal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
although he seems like he's more anti-socialist than pro-capitalist, but anyway. Uh,
yes.
yes. So, well, this has been. I think we've. I don't know if we have anything else to say about Milei at this point. I think we've covered just about everything. It's
Well, that you have to read his favorite book about the
yes.
future, The Death of Death.
Well,
Everybody
that's the thing.
has to read this.
Jose, that's the thing. I wanted to contribute. Give some time to your book. I definitely wanted to talk about Milei first, but but let's talk about the death of death and where you think this is going. You're very you have a lot of optimism that a lot of libertarians don't have, and it's kind of still like you're 20 years old. I mean that in a good way. It's and I know you're older than that.
Yes, I'm 3 times that age.
Oh
But
God, and you certainly don't look I look older than you do.
well, anyway, we are going to have rejuvenation technologies
Yeah.
coming soon in the next few years. So we need to stay alive and then work on these rejuvenation technologies to be younger in the future. And so this is the most noble cause, the most ethical thing we can do, because in advanced economies, in the USA, in Europe, in Japan, 90% of people die of age-related diseases. 90%
Yes.
of the people. So it is true that people still die of, if you want to say, uh, hurricanes, climate change,
Car
floods,
accidents,
homicides.
on the job injury, on the job injuries.
Even the Russians, count all of those. That represents only 10% of the deaths of advanced economies. Only 10%, all of those things. And 90% of people die of age-related diseases. So the most moral thing and the best thing we can do is to stop aging and death. That is why I am devoted now 200% to killing death. My goal in life is to kill death before death kills me. So this is what I'm working on, to kill death before death kills me. And actually, I make some predictions in the book, in the bank, that by the year 2045, we will have killed death. And death will become optional or accident.
Yes. And
But we will not die of aging.
And my generation, a lot of us will still be alive that will probably be able to take advantage of this. I do wonder though if this is going to happen. Maybe it won't happen immediately, but maybe we won't abolish death, but maybe we'll just live till we're 100. Maybe we'll just have an average life expectancy of 150 or 200.
Yes.
I mean, you'd consider that a victory, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And I repeat, at the time of the Roman Empire, average life expectancy was 20. 100 years ago, it was 40. Now it is reaching 80.
Yeah. Are you sure it was just 40? I would say it may be more like 60, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's definitely went up, though.
Yeah, no, you can check it. It was 40 in the world 100 years ago.
Well, it certainly still varies a lot. I mean, life expectancy 100 years ago in the United States was higher than it was in most countries in Africa. So
true.
I mean, there's a lot of factors, but I mean, it used to be that the number one killer for most people was infectious disease, and now it's just degenerative problems that And this is the important thing too, though, is we don't just want to live longer, but we want to have a quality of life too.
Right.
Well, if I'm 80 years old, I want to be able to run a marathon like a 30-year-old. I don't want to be able to run a marathon. I don't want to run a marathon like an 80-year-old. I want to run a marathon like a 30-year-old, or have sex like a 30-year-old.
Yes, actually, I would say as a 20-year-old.
Yes.
And my goal is in 20 years to have a biological age of 20 years of age. Because, as I mentioned, we expect, because of the exponential advances in technology, that in 20 years or 21 years. In the year 2045, we will be able to rejuvenate people. The goal is not to live indefinitely old. No one wants to be indefinitely old.
Yes.
The objective is to be indefinitely young. And most people don't know that the Nobel Prize in Medicine in the year 2012 was to a Japanese scientist that discovered that aging can be reversed. He got the Nobel Prize because he took old cells and he made the cells young again. In the year 2012, Nobel Prize of Medicine, Shin
Yes.
Yamanaka. Now, this was the proof of concept that we can genetically reverse aging. That is why I'm so optimistic, because this
Yes.
is bioengineering. And now we are going from rejuvenating cells to rejuvenating organs. And another friend who did his postdoc at MIT and now is a professor at Harvard, David Sinclair. David Sinclair and his team, his students, they were able to rejuvenate an organ. They rejuvenated the eyes of mice. Mice that
Yes.
were blind, they were rejuvenated their eyes only, and they became like age 20. The eyes were age 80 human years equivalent, and they went from 80 when
Yeah.
the mouse was blind to 20 when the
Yeah.
mouse could see again.
Now this is something that would probably get a whole lot of money. There are plenty of people out there who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who would pay a lot of money to have their 20-year-old eyes back. Because for a lot of people, something like that is priceless. And
Absolutely.
I might say the same thing for hearing too. But also, Jose, I'm also curious too. I wonder how much attention you're getting from athletes with stuff like this. Because a lot of athletes that they want to try to compete as long as they can. And like, how can I make my career longer? Because in a lot of ways, professional athletes, they kind of don't want to grow up. They want to keep, they don't want to retire if they don't have to. They want to keep playing the games that they love.
Yes. Well, of course, they are very interested, and not just athletes. People like Brian Johnson, who has become very popular, Brian with Y, Brian Johnson, who is investing $2 million every
Yeah.
year to rejuvenate. And he has rejuvenated,
Yeah.
um, depending on how you measure it, because there are different biological markers, about 20 years. He has become 20 years younger. Obviously, he's putting a lot of money, but he's almost a billionaire, so he has a lot of $1 million to put into his own health. But let me
Yeah.
tell you something, because you mentioned it. This will be the biggest industry in the world in 20 years, the biggest industry. And actually, let's review history. When I graduated from MIT, the biggest industry in the world was the energy industry. Energy. In fact, all the big companies were energy companies: Exxon, Shell, British Petroleum,
Yeah.
Texaco, Mobil. The biggest companies in the planet when I graduated were energy companies. And so I began working in the energy industry after MIT. But today, it's not energy anymore. Today is technology. Companies like Apple, Facebook,
Yes.
IBM, Microsoft, Google are the biggest companies in the world today. And in 20 years, the biggest companies are going to be longevity companies, rejuvenation companies, health companies. And that is why also all the big companies in technology are trying to move into longevity, all of them.
Yeah.
Um, Jeff Bezos, who is a poor person, Jeff Bezos is an investor in a company called Altos Labs,
Yeah.
because it was started in Los Altos in California, Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And
He-
and some of these guys, I think also it's maybe just personal self interest. I mean, Bezos isn't getting any younger. I
Absolutely.
would, some Gates is a lot older. I suppose Musk would be all over this, wouldn't he? I mean, Musk. I think Musk would definitely go for this. Elon. I mean,
Yes.
this just seems like something Elon would love.
Yeah, but anyway, other people who are older than him,
Yes.
like you mentioned, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is, I think he's 60, and he is the wealthiest person in the world. even though it goes up and down. He competes with Elon Musk. Sometimes Elon Musk is wealthier, sometimes Jeff Bezos is wealthier. But in any event, he has maybe 200
Bezos is 60.
billion.
Yeah, you're right. He's older than I thought. Yeah, 1964.
Yeah. So anyway, he has realized that with 200, sometimes $300 billion, it is not useful to have all this money if you die. In fact, it is not useful to be the wealthiest person in the cemetery. It's not useful. So he's investing with other people in this company, Altos Labs, that works on biological rejuvenation. I repeat, rejuvenation. Today, we know
Yes.
it's possible to rejuvenate. This is what I explain in The Death of Death, that we are not working to be immortally old. We are working to be immortally young at a biological age between 20 and 25.
Well, yeah, and certainly, what would have, it's also sometimes maybe a question of what would these people have done? It's what would Stephen Jobs have done if he hadn't died? I mean, we don't really know. It's
Of course.
I really and truly wish. I so wish that Carl Sagan could have been alive in 2020 because I wonder what he would have said about everything that happened then. But it's just because we have some people out there who still, you think about what else they could do if they were still alive, how many experiments they could do, or how productive they could be, because
Imagine Stephen Hawking also, Albert Einstein. If we had Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking, people who had incredible minds, imaginations, and were able to create new concepts, new ideas, to discover things that were unthinkable.
yeah,
So yes, we should keep everybody alive. In fact, not just only these geniuses or the wealthy people, but everybody. This is good for everybody. This is good
well,
for the economy. And this will be the biggest industry of the world in 20 years.
yeah,
In 20
well,
years.
and Hawking had some serious health issues. What would he accomplish if he could have reversed some of those health issues he had? It's, uh, you know, I would think a lot. I would think also, Jose, a lot of this stuff might go into not necessarily prolonging life, but what about things like, say, you're in a car accident, you have nerve damage, and okay, we'll shoot you up with some of these regenerative cells, and you can walk again, that kind of thing. Things
Uh,
that might have resulted in paralysis, and I mean that would be awesome right there if we could just get rid of paralysis.
Of
You
course,
know,
this will happen. This is advancing very fast. I think in 5 years we are going to cure most paraplegic people.
yeah,
We are going to be able to rebuild the spine, the vertebral column. All of these things are possible, and we know we are very close scientifically. And one more thing, which is important and that people don't know, and I love, is cancer. Cancer to me is really the perfect disease because cancer
yes,
discovered immortality. Cancer cells stop aging. Cancer cells are called biologically immortal because they don't age. So this is to me fundamental. This is incredible. Cancer discovered immortality. So the proof that
yeah,
immortality is possible is that even cancer discovered immortality, and cancer
yeah,
didn't go to MIT or to Harvard or to Stanford. Cancer cells that don't even know how to read. They don't know how to read
yeah,
or write, but they discovered immortality. What I am trying to say is that reaching immortality, discovering how immortality already happens in biology,
yeah,
is not that difficult, and we are very close. Watch this video in 10 years because I can guarantee you that in 10 years we will have cured almost all cancers because we are going to understand the secrets of cancer and what are the mutations that stop biological aging in cancer cells.
yes,
So two things will happen. Not only will we cure cancers, we will also stop aging of our bodies once we understand what cancer has done. So this is incredible what we are going to discover in the next few years in terms of rejuvenation technologies. Because I repeat again, We know that biological rejuvenation is possible. Nobel Prize of Medicine of 2012, Shinya Yamanaka, that I know personally.
How do you spell that, by the way?
Well, it's a Japanese last name, but Shinya, uh, or put Nobel Prize Medicine 2012. There were two.
That's probably the easiest way to look it up. I just want to make sure I get his name right.
Yeah.
Nobel Prize.
His last name is Yamanaka, which is a very common Japanese name, Yamanaka. His first name is Shinya. And two people got the Nobel Prize in 2012 in medicine. One was
Yamanaka. Yes. Okay. Yeah. He's yeah.
Yes.
Shinya.
Yes.
And then Yamanaka.
Yes.
Yamanaka. Yeah.
Yes. Shinya.
And I got to say, this picture of him on Wikipedia, he still looks like a kid himself.
Well,
that's good.
He is younger than me. Chronologically, he got the Nobel Prize very young because what he discovered is so revolutionary. He discovered that aging can be reversed. So he got the Nobel Prize very quickly, only 6 years later. He published his results in 2006. And in 2012, he got the Nobel Prize. This is very fast for a Nobel Prize. And yes, I think he must be 60 because I'm 61.
Yes.
And if I remember, he's 1 year younger than me.
Yeah. You know what else too, though? Sometimes when you look at immortality, I've heard things about jellyfish, and also, what about things like tardigrades? I mean, tardigrades apparently, they can survive 2,000 degrees heat. They can survive, absolute zero. What do you got to say about those things?
Yes, I also talk about those life forms which are already biologically immortal. There are small animals that are biologically immortal. Like you said, the immortal jellyfish. There are many types of jellyfish, and there are some jellyfish that can live forever, for millions of years, even though if not completely immortal, because if a rock falls on the jellyfish will die, but it doesn't age. These jellyfish don't age, and that is why they are called biologically immortal. There are some other organisms, like some hydras also that are biologically immortal. And we humans, we have two types of cells that are biologically immortal. Cancer cells, which are normal somatic cells that mutate, are mutant cells that stop aging, somatic cells. And then the germ cells that are important for reproduction, the germ cells that make spermatozoids and eggs. These germ cells also do not age. They are called biologically immortal. So even ourselves, in our bodies, we have germ cells that are biologically immortal. But there are very few cells because we are mostly somatic cells, from soma, body in Greek, soma, somatic cells. We are 99.9% somatic cells that do age. Somatic cells do age unless they mutate and become cancer, because cancer cells are old somatic cells that mutate and stop aging. So again, we have in our bodies immortal cells, the best ones, the germ cells for reproduction, and the worst one, cancer cells. And again, there are immortal animals. And even something even more important, more interesting, the first life forms in the planet, small bacteria, tiny bacteria with a round chromosome, are also biologically immortal. These bacteria that appeared maybe 4 billion years ago, we don't know if 3.5 billion, 3.8 billion, at most 4 billion years ago on planet Earth, they were also biologically immortal. Life appeared to live, not to die. The purpose of life is more life, better life, longer life, healthier life. And we know that today, and we know that we can become biologically immortal, like cancer cell has done. So again, I talk about all of that in the chronology of life at the end of the book. I have from the beginning of life on our planet, almost, as I mentioned, 4 billion years ago, with immortal bacteria, and then how we are evolving, what is the situation today, and what will happen in the year 2030 and in the year 2045, which are important times in the future. In 2030, we will probably reach longevity escape velocity. Longevity escape velocity means that we will be gaining more time alive per year we survive, because life expectancy keeps on increasing. Life expectancy keeps on increasing. As we mentioned, we have some countries reaching 80 years of average life expectancy. Actually, Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world, almost 85 years average life expectancy today in Japan. Spain is the second country in life expectancy among the major countries in the world, with 84 and a half years of average life expectancy, much higher than the USA. The USA, I think, is only 77 years of average.
The USA has been going down for the last 10 years also, Jose.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. Since the beginning of COVID was horrible in many countries, including the USA. But the trend should recover. I think by next year, hopefully, it would recover. But obviously, there are other problems. The drug problem is a big problem in the USA. But anyway, we are talking about what will happen in the next.
People are losing hope, and they're just unhealthy to begin with. They're eating a lot of crappy food.
Yes. So yeah, you need to stay healthy until 2030 and beyond. Brian Johnson, that I mentioned, Brian Johnson has a fantastic phrase. He says, "Don't die." That's his phrase, "Don't die," which is the title of his book. He just published a book with that title, "Don't Die." I recommend it. It's a very good book. It is almost as good as The Death of Death. Not as good, because I cover many things. He only covers what he does himself. But anyway, so many things are going to happen. We need to stay alive at least to the year 2030, when we will begin gaining 1 year per year we survive. So that means we will basically live long enough to live forever if we make it to 2030, but it's still aging until 2045, which is when we believe we will have biological rejuvenation for anyone who wants it. 2045.
Yes. What kind of regulatory blocks or government blocks are going to stand in the way of this? And I'm sure they're going to really do whatever they can to screw it up. How's the FDA going to screw things up? And where is this kind of stuff happening the most? I mean, this kind of research, is it a lot of it going on in Japan? Is a lot of it going on in Europe? It seems like to me it probably flourish in an unregulated economy, maybe a place like Mexico, before it would take off in America.
Yes, actually, well, the research and the ideas were developed, of course, in advanced economies. The USA, leading country in this, but also, as you mentioned, Japan, because the Nobel Prize who discovered that aging can be reversed is Japanese, Shinya Yamanaka, who is working in this company, Altos Labs, backed by Jeff Bezos, for example. So Japan is very involved in this. They plan to use these therapies in humans for eye rejuvenation in 2 years in Japan. They are changing the legal system regulations in Japan so that elderly people can take advantage of these new therapies, because they are new therapies. Some of them are very experimental, but if you have nothing to lose, if you are already old and blind, what do you have to lose if you are already blind? So probably in 2 years, this will be legal in Japan. And this will change regulation in other countries, like the FDA in the USA or in Europe. Europe is also highly regulated. It's horrible, highly regulated. So there is a lot of medical tourism to the Caribbean islands, also to Thailand, to India, to China. There is a lot of medical tourism. So, but this will make regulations adapt and to regulations to be more flexible. So I am hopeful that even the FDA will change because it will be forced to change.
But that's the thing, though, Jose. You got to realize. I mean, let's say you come up with something that cures diabetes. All of this entire industry that makes money off of diabetes, all these people who produce insulin and all this other stuff. How are they going to react to that? Because you're putting them out of business.
Yes.
Because you're coming up with a cure instead of a treatment. And
yes,
people who sell treatments don't necessarily want cures.
You said it very well, Chris. In fact, there are perverse incentives, horrible incentives. The pharmaceutical industry lives out of you staying sick forever. They don't want to cure you. They make money by you being constantly sick. But there is a disruption. This is a big disruption, which is unstoppable. So pharmaceutical companies will have to change or they will disappear. And that is why I gave the example of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos does not want to age anymore. He wants to be rejuvenated. In fact, as you know, he wants to be married or to be with his new girlfriend. And he wants to be young. And he doesn't care about the FDA. He doesn't care about the pharmaceutical companies because he has enough money to buy many of those pharmaceutical companies. So he is financing a lot of this research. So even though there is an industry against it, with perverse incentives from the past, like the pharmaceuticals that make money if we are sick. They make money if we are sick. But anyway, this is unstoppable. It's like electric cars. There is a disruption. The electric cars did not come from the normal auto companies. They didn't come from General Motors, even though General Motors made the first electric car. But they said, okay, no, this goes against our previous industry, so we should not let electric cars go. So what happened? Disruption. And disruption comes from the outside. So Elon Musk came from the outside. So the same will happen to the pharmaceutical industry. Their incentives, which are perverse, horrible, will have to change or they will disappear. They will disappear, all these big companies, if they don't change, Pfizer, Merkel, all these companies, unless they see the future and they join the future, they will disappear. And that is good. That is good. That is how humanity advances. Some companies disappear and new companies appear. Better companies with newer ideas and newer concepts, treatments, therapies. So I'm not terribly concerned about all these old pharmaceutical companies or even about the FDA, because international competition and medical tourism will force the FDA to change, or Americans will go to the Caribbean to have these therapies.
Do you think this same technology might lead to us developing things that you might consider superpowers? Like maybe, for example, the ability to run 100 meters in 2 minutes, or, swimming 100 meters in 10 seconds or something like that. Do you think we might or just being able to jump over, or the ability, for example, to jump over a house? I mean, do you think it would go to something like that, or am I dreaming?
No, you are not dreaming. This is what is happening. Probably the Olympic Games will have to be totally redefined. Also, probably, I think not only we will change ourselves to be underwater for hours and hours without having to breathe outside. In fact, we could have some, instead of the red cells today that take oxygen to our body, we could have super mega red cells that can keep a lot more oxygen, so that we can be.
And if you're in an accident where you're, let's say, like you're in a, like I knew people are in coal mining accidents, for example, and you have the ability to survive, in that kind of environment longer, that kind of thing.
Yes. So this will happen.
I have to say, Jose, if I could have a superpower, I say I would love to be a super speed reader. I mean, I would love, for example, to be able to read Atlas Shrugged in 2 hours. You know?
Yes. Well, let me tell you, I had an interview now
Or
about
to
my
read your
book.
book, or to read your book in 5 minutes. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, no, in 1 second, actually,
Yeah.
they fed this to a new artificial intelligence that makes reviews of books. And so in 1 second, my book was interviewed and a review was written by an artificial intelligence. So, yeah, these things will happen and they're happening soon. And again, I'm not afraid of it. If we can be more intelligent, if we can have superpowers, we will be able to do that. And I think it's good. It's good for you. It's good for me. It's good for humanity. And this is actually what humans are. We humans, we like challenges. We create technology. We invent new things. And to keep advancing, technology is what makes us different from animals. Animals don't really have technology. We develop technology in order to transcend human limitations. And technology allows us to have these video conferences, even though I am in Madrid and you are in
Yeah.
the USA. It allows us to travel in airplanes. It allows us to communicate with mobile cell phones
Yes.
immediately. So technology makes us more human, more human. And I think this trend will continue. We will have more humans with more capabilities, with more abilities. We will become superhumans.
And Jose, of course, who pioneered this video streaming stuff. It was, of course, the porn industry that gave us video streaming before anybody else. So I wonder what kind of sex industries might be behind some of this longevity technology. I suppose, something sex related might be there.
Sure, obviously.
Having better sex at 70 years old or something like that, or maybe wanting to have kids at 70. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, in fact, sex, pornography, prostitution has been one of the biggest and oldest industries, if not the oldest industry in human history. But yeah, it's only one of the capabilities we will have. You will be able to read books, not just porn books. You will be able to read all literature, to travel everywhere, to do so many incredible things, to reinvent
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah, speaking of travel, I think we've covered a lot. And you've got a co-author on your book, right? What's his name?
Yeah, my co-author is David Wood.
Yeah,
David
David
Wood
Wood.
is a British scientist. He studied at Cambridge, and he actually developed the first intelligent operating system for cell phones. If you had a Nokia, and I bet you probably had a Nokia, Nokia bought
Yes,
a
I had a
system
Nokia
called
once. Nokia
when
was the
Nokia
king of cell
was
phones for
Nokia.
a while.
Yes, the operating system of Nokia was called Symbian. Symbian. And my co-author was the inventor, the co-founder of Symbian. So he
Wow.
comes from the mobile industry and he's a mathematician from Cambridge, England. I studied in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we decided to write about the biggest issue in humanity today, which again is not climate change, is not terrorism, is not the Russians. It is aging. We are all aging. We are all dying. And now we know scientifically that aging can be reversed. That is why we wrote this fantastic book, which is a bestseller in 12 languages. It is even in Arabic. I was last December in Dubai and in United Arab Emirates and also in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is my book in Arabic, The Death of Death. It's kind of a nice cover also in Arabic. So my book is doing very well, and it is transcending cultures. It is transcending religions because Hindu people read it, Christian people read it, Muslim people read it, Jewish people read it, and all of us, all cultures actually wanted immortality. Immortality has been the biggest dream of humanity since the first book was written. The first book is called the Epic of Gilgamesh. the Epic of Gilgamesh, almost 5,000 years ago. And it was a book about immortality in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia. 5,000 years ago, we wanted immortality. So all cultures, all traditions, all religions offer you immortality. But now, not only religion, now we have scientific immortality because we know that aging is a process that can be reversed. So this is fantastic. I am so excited, Chris, when I talk about this, because we live in the best time ever, the best time. We are between the last mortal generation and the first immortal generation, the first immortal generation, the first dream of humanity, immortality. We are at the entrance of immortality in the next 2 decades.
Yeah, it sounds like a very interesting time to be alive right now. Yeah. Having visited 139 countries, what is your outlook for the world right now? And what places are you optimistic about? What places are you pessimistic about? Obviously, you're optimistic about Argentina. What do you think about the rest of South America, for example?
Well, I'm optimistic about humanity overall in general. That is why I spoke about long-term trends. And this is also what we have discussed a lot with Javier Milei, who is an expert on economic history. This trend continues. The human condition will continue improving. We will be wealthier. We will be healthier. We will live longer and longer. This is the trend with ups and downs. And remember, I am Venezuelan. So I think the situation in Venezuela is horrible. A quarter of the population had to leave. 8 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela. So horrible situation. But even in that case, the situation in the planet is advancing. It's moving forward. I'm very hopeful. Even countries like the USA, which is so important, will continue growing. I wish there were better politicians in the USA, because I think that how the greatest country, the greatest democracy in the planet has had these horrible political candidates. That is why I would vote for a robot president in the USA. In fact, IBM proposed that one of his computers called Watson. Watson was an artificial intelligence developed by IBM. It should become president. They had a campaign in the year 2016. You can still watch it in internet. Watson for president. And this is IBM's Watson. So anyway, the USA is a great country, a fantastic nation. I love the USA. I lived like 5 years in the East Coast in Massachusetts, and 5 years in the West Coast in California. So I love the USA. It's the leading power. But I wish it were more visionary, a more free market, and more open-minded with better politicians. Anyway, so I think the USA will continue to lead the world. Obviously, some European countries are not too far behind. I think Germany, which is the powerhouse of Europe, is still a very advanced nation, pulling obviously Europe, and now Great Britain outside the European Union, and the East Asian countries. I admire Japan. I lived 3 years in Tokyo, in Japan, and I truly admire Japan, how it has advanced. And then after Japan, the 4 East Asian tigers, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So, and after all these 4 Asian tigers, there are a new wave of tigers. There is now China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, that are copying the development model. Yeah. So I'm very optimistic. Obviously, there will be ups and downs. Good countries like South Korea, yes. South Korea, one of the most advanced nations in the world, and North Korea, one of the most backward countries in the world. And the difference is incredible.
Yeah, you've been to North Korea, yeah.
So North Korea is very poor. It's like Venezuela, $10 per person per month, average, horrible situation. And they have malaria. And the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, has malaria. And I got malaria actually in North Korea. So I can tell you because I had it in 2013 when I went to North Korea. So North Korea is
Yeah.
very poor, very poor. And South Korea, the same Koreans with the same culture, with the same history, with the same religion, with the same food. South Koreans live 10 years more than North Koreans. And South Koreans are 1,000 times richer than North Koreans. It's incredible. The same
Yes.
Koreans. One Korea lives longer in the South. One Korea is much, much wealthier in the South. So South Korea is the Korea of the future. And North Korea is the Korea of the past, the Korea of poverty, the Korea of hunger, the Korea of communism.
Yeah, South Korea's progress over the last 70 years is pretty remarkable. I mean, the way they've advanced, they've really embraced a lot of technology and developed a lot of places. I mean, I've heard Seoul is one of the most high tech cities in the world. Uh, Andrew Henderson really likes Malaysia too. The guy who does the Nomad Capitalist channel, he's got a place in Malaysia. I mean, and he's having his, and when I hear somebody like him talk about Malaysia, I just said, yeah, maybe it's worth going there. You mentioned, of course, I don't think Hong Kong's ever going to be what it used to be, but is there any place that's not really that well known that you think is up and coming?
Well, I think that what, as you said, what South Korea has done is absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. What Hong Kong has done, actually, I think Hong Kong will stay because now China is catching up. China is following the example of Hong Kong, wants to control many things, but they admire Hong Kong. The Chinese government admires what Hong Kong has been able to do. So they don't want to destroy Hong Kong and the Hong Kong economy. Um, and that is why they copied Hong Kong. Just across Hong Kong, there is Shenzhen, which is a copy of Hong Kong, but in mainland China. There are countries that have been advancing incredibly fast, not only in East Asia, like we talked about Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, but Ireland. Ireland was a very poor country. It was the country of the potato famines. In fact, I
Yes.
told you I lived 5 years in Massachusetts, in Boston, which is full of Irish people, Irish descendants. When Ireland was very poor, and actually over half of the people of Ireland left, half of the population left because it was so poor. Now Ireland has an income per capita higher than the USA, higher than Germany, which is the powerhouse of Europe. I repeat, it is over 10 $100,000 per person per year, the income per capita, $100,000 in Ireland. To me, Ireland is an example. Also, some of the former Soviet countries in the Baltics, like Estonia, I admire Estonia. Estonia has done an incredible revolution, peaceful revolution after leaving the Soviet Union, and they followed Milton Friedman. They
Yes.
they copied many of the ideas of Friedman. They created also a single tax, and they opened the economy. And Estonia also is the first country, electronic country in the world. They have
Yes.
citizenship and many things. But of course, Estonia is a tiny country. Is less than 1 million per.
Yeah. I think Milei could possibly learn a lot from what they've done in Estonia. Or also, I also said, Milei could probably learn a lot from Václav Klaus, who did what he could to liberalize Czechia. I
Yes,
would love to. I would love to see Milei have a meeting with Václav Klaus or Mart Lahr. Klaus from Czechia or Lahr from Estonia.
absolutely. And then, I was just now in one of the free cities or free economic zones being created in the world. This one is in Honduras. It's called Prospera, which
Yeah, I've heard a
means,
lot about Prospera. Yeah.
yeah, from prosperity, Prospera. And one of their major areas is longevity. In fact, there has been an experiment called Vitalia. Vitalia.city, the city of life, the city of immortality, Vitalia.city. And now they are moving into all these rejuvenation therapies because they don't have the FDA behind, no Food and Drug Administration. They can actually use many of these experimental therapies. And actually, Brian Johnson, the guy who wrote Don't Die, he does his therapies in Prospera, in Vitalia, in this island of Roatan in the Caribbean side of Honduras. So yeah, even Brian Johnson has gone there because he cannot do it in the USA. And he invests $2 million on his health. If the USA doesn't let to put that money in the USA, he goes to Honduras. So I am excited about these experiments of new free cities like Vitalia.city.
Well, yeah, I think you definitely see some of these places become, havens for experimental medical treatments. Any place that gives you a lot of optimism in Africa?
Well, Africa now is also growing. People were very pessimistic about Africa, but the continent is growing now like 5% per year in terms of GDP. Of course, some nations go much faster, 6, 7, 8%. Some nations just grow 1%. But Africa is moving forward. And I am very excited, not only about Africa, but about India. India now is growing faster than China. We talked so much about China growing and so on, but now India, which is much more democratic than China, is going faster than China and so many other African countries. So yes, I think the whole world is changing because we are learning. I mean, we are not so stupid. If one country can do it, why can other countries not do it? If South Korea grew so fast, and we know what South Korea did right, and we also know what North Korea did wrong, we just need to copy South Korea. Or before, when we had East Germany and West Germany, East Germany was a disaster. When I was a communist, actually, as I told you, when I was at university at MIT, I went to Berlin. This was 1984. There was the Berlin Wall. There was communism. And when I went to Berlin, being a communist still, I went to East Berlin, and the city was gray, was dark, and there were no bananas, and there was no coffee. And I am South America. Imagine, I cannot be in a country without bananas and without coffee. And that was East Germany. And then I go to West Berlin, and there is fantastic coffee, any types of coffee, cappuccino, cafe au lait, black coffee, and beautiful bananas bigger than the bananas from South America. I said, something works in West Berlin that does not work in East Berlin. And that is how I changed my mind, actually, after being in Berlin, because it was a divided city. East Berlin was poor, dark, horrible. And West Berlin was a lively city, full of energy. It was very entrepreneurial, even at that time in 1985, when I stopped being a communist and I became a capitalist, a libertarian. So, yes, I see opportunities everywhere. These free economic zones, they might become like West Berlin in East Germany, or Shenzhen in China. Shenzhen is a capitalist paradise in communist China, for example, and it's changing China. It really is fantastic. We live in incredible times. We are going to see so many technological advances in the next 2 decades. In fact, I like to say in the next 2 decades, there will be more advances in science and technology than in the last 2,000 years. Incredible. I repeat, in the next 2 decades, more advances than in the last 2 millennia. 2 millennia. Things are moving faster and faster.
Okay, so what do you think about South America? You're pretty optimistic about Argentina. What about the rest of South America? Where do you think that's going to go?
Well, I do think Javier Milei will be successful, and there will be midterm elections in 2 years in Argentina. I think Javier Milei will be revindicated. he will gain many more people in the Congress, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So he will have more credibility. And he is spreading this message throughout the continent. There are some countries that are doing more or less okay, like Uruguay in South America, Costa Rica in Central America, Panama also Central America. So I think these countries are doing relatively well, as opposed to the communist countries of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Sadly, they cannot change because they are dictatorships. Nicaragua is a dictatorship, Cuba is a dictatorship, Venezuela is a dictatorship. So they cannot change. But eventually, because other countries that are democratic and are growing faster, are becoming wealthier faster, things will change. Humans, we are not stupid. We will see why. Venezuela was rich before because it was rich. And now, as a communist country, it lost 8 million people. A quarter of the population has left Venezuela. So people begin to think, maybe communism is bad after all. It's not the dream of equality, which does not exist, but it is humans with our initiative, with our creativity, competing and building a better world.
Since you've been involved with dollarization products, what do you think about El Salvador and Ecuador?
Yes, actually, dollarization is so powerful that no president can say that they will de-dollarize, that they will eliminate the dollar in Ecuador or in El Salvador, because everybody, including the communists, there are communists still in El Salvador and in Ecuador, they know the dollar is liked by 95% of the population. The same in Panama. People have the dollar. And it has been already long enough, a quarter of a century since the year 2000, that these countries have already in their chips that dollars are good. And that has stabilized the economy, because before there was hyperinflation. There was hyperinflation in Ecuador when we began the dollarization in the year 2000. It was going to begin hyperinflation. In fact, there was 100% inflation just before dollarization, 100%. And in El Salvador, there was no hyperinflation, but no one trusted the local currency that was called the colon, from Christopher Columbus, the colon. So people didn't trust the currency. So interest rates were very high, even though there was no hyperinflation or even high inflation. So once they dollarized, eliminating the colon, prices came down, interest rates came down. So they were like between 10 and 20%, and now they are like interest rates in dollar, very low interest rates. So that has given stability, that has given credibility. So yes, I think the best thing that has happened to El Salvador and to Ecuador has been dollarization. And it will stay. It is so popular that it will stay.
Yeah, definitely. It's what do you think is going to happen for Venezuela? Do you think it's just, is everybody just going to leave, or think somebody might decide to invade if they keep? I don't know.
Yeah.
None of this has lasted forever, but it's also lasted in Cuba a lot longer than Venezuela.
Yes. Yeah, it is a very tragic situation, very tragic. I was just in Venezuela to sell my parents' home, something that could be worth $500,000. I don't know if I can sell even for $50,000 now. I just put it in sale. So I don't know. Prices have collapsed. The whole economy is collapsed. The country has collapsed. So no one knows what will happen. It's a very sad situation. But again, even with that sad situation, it is sadder, I would say, much sadder in North Korea. And North Korea also has been longer, since the Korean War.
Yes.
The Korean War was in the 1950s, early 1950s. So we are talking about 70 years of communism in North Korea. And there is no way out in North Korea. predictable way out, but there are the unpredictable things, many unknown unknowns.
Jose,
Maybe
yeah, that brings
someone
up
in
the
the
whole question though. You were behind the Iron Curtain. When the Berlin Wall came down, did you think we'd be still fighting the communists 35 years later?
Yeah, that was incredible. How the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union collapsed by itself. So it is possible that North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela will collapse internally, or that there could be a revolt from part of the military, because they have the army. We are on defense. We don't have arms. The citizens, normal citizens, the arms are under the control of the military and the government of Venezuela, North Korea, Cuba. So we cannot have a revolt from the people because we don't have arms. They do, and they are willing to kill. They have shown that they can kill anyone. So it will probably have to be a pacific revolt. But within the army, there are disagreements, actually. One of these disagreements can lead a revolution that might not be peaceful, but it will change the government. So who knows? I do forecasting, but technological forecasting. I don't do political forecasting. And I repeat, I believe so much in technology that I would like a robot president. That is what I want. I want a robot president. I want artificial intelligence to make us more intelligent so that we can see the stupidity of communism. Communism is so stupid. It has made nations only poorer and poorer and poorer. In every country that has tried communism, in any time that has tried communism, in every continent, there is not one successful example of communism. Not one. Never, ever. And there will not be one, because it does not work. Communism does not work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So that's the question. Why does this idea die?
Yes, but anyway, things will change. I hope sooner and for the better, because the trend for humanity keeps on improving, increasing. So I am positive, and technology will lead the way, because the advances in technology, like rejuvenation is less than 2 decades away. Huh? So this is exciting. We actually, Chris, we had to watch this video in 2045, because in 2045 we will be younger, and we can see this video when we were old today. When we were old today.
Yes, indeed. I think it's going to be very interesting. Any other place that really stands out for you right now? I mean, you've certainly been around. Any place you really want to go to you haven't been to yet?
Well, I don't want to go to some of the other Caribbean islands. The thing is that the Caribbean has like 20 different countries, but they are tiny, tiny countries. The same in the Pacific Ocean. In the Pacific Ocean,
Yes.
all these little islands are countries. So they also have like 20 countries in the Pacific. So I do want to take a long cruise to go through the Pacific, and another long cruise in the Caribbean to see many of these small countries, these small islands, because they are paradise on earth. I think the Pacific Ocean, the Caribbean islands are really fantastic places. And that is why in some Caribbean locations, they are creating these longevity clinics that are not under US control, under FDA regulations. So yes, I want to see, for example, Bermuda. Bermuda probably has potential for many of these therapies as well. And Jamaica, maybe. I don't know. Some of these places are interesting. So competition is always good. Competition of legal systems, regulations, and Mars. We haven't talked about the moon and Mars. As you know, Elon Musk has a plan to be in a decade on planet Mars. I hope it happens in 1 decade, but otherwise it will be a few years later. But we are going to go to Mars. In fact, as you probably know, in 2 to 3 years, we will be back in the moon. Humans, we will go back to the moon, and this will excite the whole planet. Oh, we are going back to the moon. And many countries, it's not just the USA now, and also not NASA. Private companies can go to the moon. SpaceX has a mission to overfly the moon next year. SpaceX, not NASA. And obviously, the Japanese have their program. Even the Israelis, or Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, they have a space plan, and they sent a Mars lander. No, it was going around Mars. They didn't send a lander to Mars, the United Arab Emirates. So anyway, there is competition to go to space. And Elon Musk says that we need to experiment with new forms of governance and new forms of currency. How about a Mars coin, a Mars Bitcoin, maybe? How about a Mars robot president? How about the first president of Mars or of the moon will be a robot? I think we are going to do so many new things in the next 10 years. It is exciting.
Yes, we are going to do some exciting things. It's well, it certainly seems like it's an exciting time to be alive. This has been a great talk, Jose. I'm glad we could bring you on here to get you to talk about all these wonderful topics. And certainly, what's going on with Milei and all this other stuff. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I am really happy. We have been here 2 hours, so we all have to go. But remember, we live in the most incredible times. This is the best time to be alive and to remain alive. So, as we say, the Trekkies like me, live long and prosper, my friend. Live long and prosper.
Yes.
Okay.
Live long and prosper. Yes.
Thank you so
please,
much.
Yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out my Substack, go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Jose's book is The Death of Death. Do you have another website or anything else, or just the? Yeah. And that book is available in many languages.
Go to the website, thedeathofdeath.org. Thedeathofdeath.org.
Yeah, it was originally written in Spanish. It took a while before you found an English publisher too, but you've how many languages is it in, by the way?
Yeah, right now in 12 languages and 10 more languages by the end of the year. Top publishers, like in English, it is published by the #1 scientific publisher, Springer Nature, top publisher in science.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good. It's been a good book. It's been great having you on here, Jose, and certainly, we'll certainly check out the Liberty International Conference. It's definitely worth attending. It will be in the USA this year, so if you don't want to leave the USA, you got your opportunity to go to that event this November. That's the first time it's been on American soil in a while. It's they go all over the world. I've been to some interesting places because of that conference.
Yes. So, thank you again. Let's go into the future. Live long and prosper, my friend.
Yes, thank you, Jose. Yeah. I'm Chris Bigger, and we're out. Yes.